Clara's knees hit the frozen ground. 9 children. 9 reasons to keep walking. 9 reasons she couldn't die. But her body had surrendered. Baby Lily stopped crying an hour ago, too cold or too weak. Samuel, just 16, tried to lift his mother. "Get up, Mama, please." She couldn't. The snow was falling like a burial shroud. Then hoofbeats. A man's voice cut through the wind. "Dear God, woman, how many children you got?" Clara looked up at the stranger on horseback. "9, sir, and they're all I have left." If you want to see how this widow and her 9 children survive, subscribe to my channel and follow this story to the very end. Comment your city below. Let me see how far this story travels. Clara Elizabeth Thornton had been walking for 3 days. Her boots had split open on the second day. The canvas covering their wagon had torn loose on the first night. Now, on this 3rd day of November 1878, with 9 children trailing behind her like ducklings following a dying mother, she finally understood what surrender felt like. "Mama." Samuel's voice was hoarse. At 16, he carried baby Lily strapped to his chest and 4-year-old Sarah on his back. His legs shook with every step. "Mama, we need to stop." "Can't stop." Clara didn't turn around. If she turned around, she'd see their faces. If she saw their faces, she'd break. "Town's got to be close." "You said that yesterday." "Then I'll say it again tomorrow." Behind Samuel, 14-year-old Abigail held Grace's hand. Grace was only 2 and kept stumbling in the snow. Thomas, 12, had 6-year-old Elijah on his shoulders. Hannah and Rebecca, 10 and 8, walked arm in arm, holding each other upright. 9 children, 6 girls, 3 boys, and not a single one complained. That's what broke Clara's heart more than the cold, more than the hunger, more than the 3 days of walking through Montana territory with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Her children had learned too young that complaining changed nothing. They'd learned it from watching their father die. They'd learned it from being thrown out of their home. They'd learned it from every town that looked at a widow with 9 children and saw only burden. "Mrs. Thornton." Thomas spoke carefully, the way he always did when he was about to say something his mother didn't want to hear. "The baby ain't moved in a while." Clara stopped. The wind howled around them, carrying ice that bit through her thin shawl. She turned slowly, walked back to Samuel, and pressed her palm against Lily's cheek. Cold. Too cold. "Give her to me." "Mama, you can barely—" "Give her to me." Samuel unstrapped the baby with frozen fingers. Clara took Lily, tucked her inside her dress against her skin, and started walking again. Faster now. "Where are we going, Mama?" Rebecca's small voice carried over the wind. She was 8 years old and still believed her mother had answers. "Forward." Clara's jaw tightened. "We're going forward." The crossroads appeared an hour later. 4 roads meeting at nothing. No signpost, no marker. Just 4 directions and a sky that promised more snow before nightfall. Clara stopped in the center of the crossroads and looked at each path. East, west, north, south. They all looked the same. They all looked like death. "Which way?" Samuel asked. Clara didn't answer. She was holding Lily against her chest, feeling the baby's heartbeat faint, too faint, and trying to remember how to pray. She'd stopped praying when William died. Stopped believing that God heard widows and orphans. "Mama," Abigail's voice cracked. "Which way do we go?" "I don't know." The words came out before Clara could stop them. 3 days of walking. 3 days of pretending she knew what she was doing, and now the truth spilled out like water through broken dam. "I don't know, Abby. I don't know where we're going. I don't know if there's a town ahead. I don't know if we'll survive the night." Silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then Sarah, 4 years old, half-frozen, exhausted, started to cry. Not loudly, just soft hiccuping sobs that said everything words couldn't. Clara closed her eyes. William. She thought, if you can hear me, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I tried to keep them safe. I tried to be strong enough for all of them. But I'm not. I'm just one woman, and there are 9 of them, and I can't, Mama. Samuel's voice was strange, urgent. Mama, someone's coming. Clara's eyes snapped open. Hoofbeats, coming from the East Road, getting louder. She stepped in front of her children, instinctively gathering them behind her, like a hen with chicks. It didn't matter that Samuel was taller than her now. It didn't matter that she had no weapon, no strength left. She was their mother. She would die before she let anyone hurt them. The rider emerged from the snow like a figure from a dream. He was tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the wind. His horse was a massive black stallion, well-fed and well-cared for a rich man's horse. He rode with the easy confidence of someone who owned the land he traveled. He pulled the horse to a stop 10 feet away and stared. Clara stared back. She knew what he saw. A woman with wild hair escaping her braid skin, chapped from wind and cold dress torn and mud-stained. A baby pressed against her chest. 8 children huddled behind her, ranging from a teenager to a toddler, all of them wearing clothes too thin for winter. He's going to ride past, she thought. They all ride past. The man pushed his hat back. His face was weathered but not unkind. Strong jaw gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. A scar ran along his left cheek, faded and old. Ma'am. His voice was low, rough like gravel. You look like you're in trouble. Clara lifted her chin. We're fine. You're standing in the middle of a crossroads in a November blizzard with... He stopped. His eyes moved over the children, counting. His expression shifted from concern to something closer to shock. How many young'uns you got there? 9. 9? 9. Clara's voice didn't waver. 6 girls, 3 boys. The baby's 6 months, the oldest is 16. They're fed, they're clothed, and they're mine. You got a problem with that? The man was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Not cruelly, it was a surprised sound, almost involuntary, as if she'd said something he didn't expect. No, ma'am, no problem. He swung down from his horse. Standing, he was even taller than he'd looked in the saddle, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that seemed built for carrying weight. Name's Jacob McAllister. I own a ranch about 2 hours east of here. Good for you. It's about to be good for you, too. He started unstrapping his saddlebags. I got supplies for a week. Jerky hardtack blankets. We can make it to my place before dark if we leave now. Clara didn't move. I don't accept charity. Who said anything about charity? Jacob pulled a heavy wool blanket from his saddle and walked toward the children. Samuel stepped forward, protective, but Jacob just handed him the blanket. You can work it off. I got a big house with 8 empty rooms and not a soul to fill them. You cook? I cook. Clean? I clean. Keep 9 children alive through a Montana winter. He was already pulling out more blankets, distributing them to the smaller children. Grace grabbed his hand and held on. He didn't pull away. Seems like you're more than qualified. Clara watched him wrap Hannah in a blanket, watched him kneel down to speak softly to Rebecca, watched him ruffle Elijah's hair. Her children were leaning toward him like flowers toward sun, desperate for warmth, desperate for someone other than their mother to tell them everything would be all right. Why? Clara's voice came out harder than she intended. Why would you help us? You don't know us. You don't know what we've done, what people say about us. Jacob straightened. He looked at her directly, and for a moment Clara saw something in his gray eyes that made her breath catch. Pain. Old, deep, carefully hidden pain. Because, ma'am, he said quietly, I know what it's like to stand at a crossroads with nowhere to go. I know what it's like when the whole world looks at you and sees nothing but your worst day. He gestured toward his horse. Now you can stand here arguing with me until we all freeze to death, or you can swallow that pride and let me help your children. Your choice. But make it fast, that baby needs warmth, and this ain't no place for deciding." Clara looked at Lily, still pressed against her chest. The baby's breathing was shallow. Too shallow. She looked at her other children. Samuel's lips were blue. Sarah had stopped crying, she was too cold to cry. Grace was shivering so hard her teeth chattered. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Fine. The word tasted like surrender. But this is temporary. Soon as the snow clears, we find work, we move on. I don't take handouts, Mr. McAllister. I earn my keep. Never doubted it for a second. Jacob was already lifting Grace onto his horse. Samuel, right? You're the oldest. Samuel nodded, surprised that Jacob remembered his name from Clara's count. You and Thomas walk alongside. Abigail, you take the little ones on the horse with me. Mrs. Thornton. Clara. Jacob paused, nodded once. Clara, you ride behind me. Keep that baby warm against my back. I can walk. I'm sure you can. You've been walking 3 days with 9 children and not a complaint. But walking's over now. He mounted the horse, reached down a hand. Let someone else carry the weight for a while. Clara stared at his hand. Strong, calloused, steady. The last man who'd offered her a hand had been William on their wedding day. She'd taken it without hesitation, full of hope and trust and foolish belief that life would be kind. Life hadn't been kind. William was dead. Hope was a word she'd forgotten. Trust was a risk she couldn't take. But 9 children were watching her. 9 children who needed to see their mother accept help when help was offered. 9 children who needed to learn that strength wasn't the same as stubbornness. Clara took his hand. Jacob pulled her up behind him on the horse. She wrapped her arms around his waist. Lily pressed between them and felt warmth seep into her frozen body for the first time in 3 days. Hold on, Jacob said. Clara held on. They rode east into the storm. The McAllister ranch emerged from the blizzard like something from a dream. Clara had expected a cabin, maybe a farmhouse, something modest that matched the plain clothes Jacob wore. Instead, she saw a sprawling 2-story structure made of stone and timber with a wraparound porch and smoke rising from 3 different chimneys. A massive barn stood nearby, along with several outbuildings. Fences stretched toward the horizon, disappearing into white. Dear Lord, Abigail breathed. It's a mansion. It's just a house. Jacob's voice was flat. Big house for 1 man. Too big. He guided the horse to the porch just as the front door swung open. A black man stood in the doorway, tall despite his age, with close-cropped gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He wore an apron over his shirt, and his hands were dusted with flour. Jacob McAllister. His voice was deep, carrying a note of long-suffering patience. You went to town for supplies. You come back with... He counted the children. His eyebrows rose. A whole passel of young'uns. Should I ask? This is Clara Thornton and her children. They're staying. Jacob dismounted, helped Clara down. Ezra, the baby needs warming. Hot water, warm blankets, broth if you've got it. Ezra was already moving. He took Lily from Clara's arms with practiced gentleness, checked the baby's breathing, and nodded once. She'll be fine. Cold, but not frostbite. He looked at Clara. Ma'am, you look half dead yourself. I'm fine. She's been walking 3 days. Jacob was lifting the smaller children down from the horse. In that dress and those boots. Carrying that baby. Ezra's expression softened. 3 days. With all these children. He shook his head slowly. Lord have mercy. You come inside right now, all of you. I got stew on the stove and bread in the oven. First thing we do is get everyone fed and warm. The children didn't wait for permission. They streamed past Ezra into the house like water finding cracks in a dam. Hannah grabbed Rebecca's hand. Thomas shepherded Elijah and Sarah. Even Samuel, who'd been so careful to stay strong, let out a small sound of relief when the heat from inside hit his face. Clara stood on the porch watching them go. Her children. Fed. Warm. Safe. For tonight at least. Mrs. Thornton. Ezra's voice was gentle. You coming inside? Clara's legs wouldn't move. Now that the walking was done, now that the survival was temporarily secured, her body was shutting down. She felt her knees buckle. Jacob caught her before she hit the ground. Whoa there! His arms were strong around her, steadying. When's the last time you ate? Clara tried to remember. Tuesday. It's Friday. Then Friday. You ain't eaten since Tuesday. The children needed it more. Jacob looked at her. There it was again, that flash of pain in his eyes, quickly hidden. He lifted her as easily as he'd lifted Grace, carried her inside. Ezra, get this woman fed before she falls over dead. On it. Ezra had already passed Lily to Abigail, who was cradling the now-awake baby with practiced ease. Sit her by the fire. I'll bring soup. Jacob set Clara down in a chair near the fireplace. The warmth was almost painful on her frozen skin. She watched, dazed, as her children spread through the room, sitting on the floor, on chairs on each other. Rebecca had found a spot by the fire and was holding her hands toward the flames like they were the most precious things she'd ever seen. Is this where we're staying, Mama? Elijah asked. His eyes were wide as he looked around at the high ceilings, the polished furniture, the paintings on the walls. It's got stairs. Just for a while, Clara managed. Just until she's strong enough to argue with me about it, Jacob cut in. He was hanging up his coat, his back to her, which should be a few days knowing her type. My type. Stubborn as a mule and twice as proud. He turned, and there was the ghost of a smile on his weathered face. Nothing wrong with it. Just hard on a body. Clara opened her mouth to retort, but Ezra appeared with a bowl of stew and a stern expression. You eat that. All of it. No talking until the bowl's empty. He looked at Jacob. You too. Sit down. I'll serve the children. I don't need... Boy, I changed your diapers. Don't you tell me what you don't need. Ezra was already ladling stew into bowls for the children. Sit. Jacob sat. Clara ate. The stew was the best thing she'd ever tasted, not because of what was in it, but because it meant her children wouldn't go hungry tonight. She watched them eat, watched the color return to their cheeks, watched their shoulders slowly relax from the hunched positions they'd held for 3 days. Just for a while, she told herself. Just until we find something else. We don't belong here. But when Rebecca laughed at something Thomas whispered, an actual laugh, the first Clara had heard in weeks, something cracked inside her chest. Hope. Dangerous, foolish, wonderful hope. After dinner, Ezra took charge of getting the children to bed. 8 rooms upstairs, he announced. The little ones can share. Samuel, you get the room at the end of the hall. Miss Abigail, there's a room next to the nursery for you and the baby. Nursery? Clara's voice sharpened. There's a nursery. Silence fell. Jacob had gone still by the fireplace. His hand rested on the mantle fingers gripping the wood until his knuckles went white. Ezra spoke carefully. There was a nursery. It's been closed up for 5 years, but it's got a crib, and the baby needs somewhere to sleep. Clara looked at Jacob. His face was turned toward the fire, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the rigid line of his shoulders. Mr. McAllister. Use the nursery. His voice was rough. That's what it's there for. He walked out before she could respond. The front door opened and closed. Cold air swept through the room. Clara turned to Ezra. What happened? Ezra sighed. He looked suddenly older, the weight of years pressing down on his shoulders. That ain't my story to tell, ma'am. All I can say is that man's been walking through his own blizzard for 5 years now. Maybe longer. He picked up the empty bowls. You and your children are the first living souls to step foot in this house since Mrs. Elizabeth died. His wife? His wife. And his son, little William, 3 years old. Ezra's voice broke slightly. Lost them both to the fever 5 years back. Jacob ain't been the same since. Clara looked at the closed door. She knew that grief. She wore it like a second skin. The kind of grief that didn't fade, didn't soften, just became part of you, until you couldn't remember who you'd been before it. "The children will be respectful," she said quietly. "We won't disturb anything we shouldn't." "Ma'am," Ezra met her eyes. "Those children of yours, they're exactly what this house needs. What he needs. Don't be too quick to leave." Clara didn't answer. She just took Lily from Abigail's arms and followed Ezra upstairs to the nursery. The room was small, but perfectly kept. A crib with hand-carved spindles stood in the corner. A rocking horse sat by the window. Children's clothes, carefully folded, filled a small dresser. Everything was waiting for a child who would never return. Clara laid Lily in the crib. The baby stirred, then settled, breathing easier now in the warmth. "Sleep well, little one," Clara whispered. "Tomorrow we figure out how to earn our keep." She didn't notice Jacob standing in the hallway watching through the crack in the door. Didn't see the way he pressed his hand against his chest as if trying to hold his heart inside his body. Didn't know that she and her 9 children had just cracked open a door he'd sealed shut 5 years ago. Morning came gray and cold. Clara woke before dawn, as she always did. Survival had trained her body to grab every available hour, waste nothing, rest never. The house was silent as she crept downstairs. She found the kitchen, easily big, well-equipped, the domain of someone who took pride in feeding people. Ezra's territory clearly. But Ezra wasn't awake yet, and Clara needed to prove her worth before anyone could suggest she was a burden. She stoked the fire, found flour, egg, salt, started making biscuits. "You're up early." Clara didn't jump. She'd heard his footsteps on the stairs, careful, quiet, the walk of a man who was used to moving through empty spaces. "So are you?" she said without turning. "Coffee's almost ready." Jacob came to stand by the stove. He looked different in the morning light, tireder somehow. Older. The lines around his eyes deeper than they'd seemed yesterday. Ezra usually handles breakfast. Ezra handled 9 unexpected guests last night. Man deserves to sleep. Clara pulled the biscuit pan from the oven. "Sit down. You're in my way." Jacob sat. She poured him coffee, set biscuits on the table, found butter and jam in the cold pantry. All without asking permission, all as if she belonged here. "You always this bossy?" Jacob asked. "You always ask stupid questions." He almost smiled. Almost. They ate in silence for a while. The kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just 2 people who didn't need words to fill space. Finally, Jacob spoke. "Ezra told you. About Elizabeth. About William." It wasn't a question. Clara nodded. "He told me. And you didn't run screaming into the snow. Mr. McAllister, I've buried a husband, lost a home, walked 3 days through a blizzard with 9 children, and been called every ugly name a widow can be called." Clara met his eyes. "A man who grieves his wife and child doesn't scare me. It makes me trust him more." Jacob's hand tightened around his coffee cup. "Why?" "Because a man who can love that hard ain't likely to hurt what he loves." She stood, gathered the dishes. "Now I need to get my children up and figure out what I can do to earn our keep. You got mending needs doing, cleaning. I can work in the kitchen, tend a garden, manage a household." "Clara." She stopped. Jacob stood slowly. He was close now, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair, the old sorrow carved into every line of his face. "You don't need to earn anything," he said quietly. "You and your children can stay as long as you need. No conditions. No expectations. That ain't how the world works. Then let's make it how this house works." He reached out, almost touched her shoulder, then pulled back. "I've got money enough for 10 lifetimes, and not a soul to share it with. You've got 9 children, and not 2 nickels to rub together. Seems like the Lord might have put us at that crossroads for a reason. Clara's throat tightened. Don't trust it, the voice in her head warned. Don't trust kindness. Kindness always comes with a price. But standing in that kitchen with the smell of biscuits and coffee in the air, with her children sleeping safely upstairs for the first time in weeks, she wanted to trust it. God help her, she wanted to believe. 1 week, she said finally. Give me 1 week to prove we're not a burden. If we can't pull our weight, we leave. And if you can. Clara held his gaze. Then we'll talk about what comes next. Jacob nodded slowly. 1 week. He held out his hand. Clara looked at it. Strong. Calloused. Steady. She shook it. And somewhere upstairs, baby Lily started to cry, a good cry, a hungry cry, the cry of a child who expected to be fed. Clara smiled, the first real smile in months. Excuse me, I've got a baby to tend. She walked out of the kitchen with her shoulders straight and her heart pounding. 1 week. 1 week to build something from nothing. 1 week to see if hope was a lie or a promise. Behind her, Jacob watched her go. And for the first time in 5 years, the house felt warm. The week passed faster than Clara expected. By the 3rd day, her children had transformed Jacob McAllister's silent house into something unrecognizable. Noise filled every corner. Footsteps thundered up and down the stairs. Laughter echoed through rooms that had known only grief for 5 years. Elijah discovered the banister was perfect for sliding. Grace learned to chase the barn cats. Thomas found Jacob's small collection of books and devoured them like a starving man at a feast. And Rebecca sang. She sang while helping Abigail wash dishes. She sang while folding laundry. She sang old hymns and folk songs and made up melodies that had no words at all. Her voice was clear and sweet, carrying through the house like sunlight through windows. On that 3rd evening, Clara found Jacob standing in the hallway, motionless, listening. Rebecca was in the kitchen singing Amazing Grace while she dried the supper plates. She didn't know anyone was listening. She just sang because singing was as natural to her as breathing. Clara watched Jacob's face. Something was happening there, something painful and beautiful at once. His jaw was tight, but his eyes were wet. Mr. McAllister. He didn't look at her. Elizabeth used to sing that hymn every Sunday morning, said it was her favorite. Clara stood beside him, close enough to feel the tension radiating from his body. I can tell Rebecca to stop. If it's too hard. No. The word came out rough, almost broken. Don't you dare tell that child to stop singing. He finally turned to look at Clara. I'd forgotten what music sounded like in this house. I'd forgotten what living sounded like. Living's noisy. It is. Something shifted in his expression. I didn't know how quiet death was until your children showed me. Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They stood together in the hallway, listening to Rebecca sing until the song ended and the spell broke. Jacob cleared his throat. Your boy Samuel. He's been helping in the barn. I told him to make himself useful. He's more than useful. He's got a gift with horses, steady hands, calm voice. My foreman said he's never seen a green kid take to it so fast. Clara felt a swell of pride she tried to hide. His father taught him. Before. Good man was he, your husband. The best man I ever knew. Clara's voice softened. William Thornton worked 12-hour days in those mines so his children could eat. Never raised his voice, never raised his hand. Loved those kids like they were made of gold. She paused. He died trying to save 3 other men trapped in a cave-in. Went back in when everyone else ran out. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. That's how you measure a man. Not by what he does when it's easy. By what he does when it cost him everything. He'd have liked you, I think. Jacob looked surprised. Why? Because you went back into the cold. When you saw us at that crossroads, you could have ridden past. Most men would have. But you stopped. You helped. Clara met his eyes. William would have said that makes you worth knowing. Something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. Two people who had lost everything standing in a hallway, learning how to recognize each other. "Supper's getting cold," Clara said finally. "You coming?" "Right behind you." They walked to the kitchen together, and if their shoulders brushed in the narrow hallway, neither one mentioned it. The days took on a rhythm. Mornings belonged to work. Clara cooked, cleaned, mended clothes, organized the chaos of 9 children. Ezra taught her his recipes, shared his secrets for keeping a house running smooth. They worked side by side in easy silence, two people who understood that some bonds formed through labor, not words. "You're good at this," Ezra said one morning, watching Clara roll out pie crust with practiced hands. "Running a household, managing all these young'uns. Most women would have broken under half this weight. Breaking's a luxury I can't afford." That's what Jacob said, after Elizabeth and William died. Ezra's voice was careful. Said breaking wasn't an option. So he just stopped. Stopped feeling. Stopped living. Stopped everything except breathing and working. Clara's hands stilled on the rolling pin. "He told you that?" "Didn't have to. I've known that boy since he was Samuel's age. Watched him grow up, watched him fall in love, watched him lose everything in the span of 3 days. Ezra shook his head slowly. The fever took Elizabeth first. She held on long enough to say goodbye. William went 2 days later. Jacob buried them both in the same week. Clara closed her eyes. She knew that pain. The kind that hollowed you out and left nothing but shell. "He's different now," Ezra continued. "Since you came. Since the children came. He's waking up. Slowly. Like a man who's been asleep too long. We won't be here forever, Ezra. Maybe not." The old man's eyes were knowing. "But maybe you're here long enough. Long enough to remind him what living looks like." Clara didn't respond. She just went back to rolling the pie crust, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest that felt too much like hope. Afternoons belonged to the children. Jacob, despite his gruff exterior, had a gift for teaching. He showed Thomas how to mend fences and calculate the cost of supplies. He taught Hannah to care for the horses, brushing their coats until they gleamed. He let Elijah follow him everywhere, answering the 6-year-old's endless questions with patience Clara hadn't expected. "Why's that cow so fat?" Elijah asked one afternoon. "She's not fat. She's pregnant." "What's pregnant?" "Means she's got a baby growing inside her." "How'd the baby get inside her?" Clara, passing by with a basket of laundry, held her breath. Jacob didn't miss a beat. "God put it there." Elijah considered this. "God must be real busy putting babies everywhere." "He is. Now go help your sister with the chickens." Elijah ran off. Clara let out the breath she'd been holding. "Nice save," she said. "I've answered harder questions." Jacob's eyes crinkled at the corners, almost a smile. "Your boy's curious. That's good. Curious minds build empires. Or drive their mothers to madness. That too." They shared a look. Something warm passed between them. Clara looked away, first her cheeks flushing in a way that made her feel like a foolish girl, instead of a widow with 9 children. "I should go," she said. "Laundry won't fold itself." "Clara." She stopped. "Thank you," Jacob said quietly, "for letting your children fill this place up. I didn't know how empty it was until they showed me." Clara's throat tightened. "They needed filling up too. We all did." She walked away before she could say anything else, before she could tell him that his house wasn't the only thing being filled, before she could admit that somewhere in the last few days, hope had stopped being a stranger. The end of the first week brought visitors. Clara was in the kitchen when she heard the carriage arrive. She looked out the window and felt her stomach drop. A woman was stepping down from an expensive buggy, tall, elegant, dressed in clothes that cost more than Clara had ever earned in a year. Her hair was perfectly arranged beneath a fashionable hat, Her face was beautiful in a cold, carved way. "Who's that?" Clara asked Ezra. The old man's expression darkened. "Victoria Ashworth, widow, rich. Been trying to get her claws into Jacob since Elizabeth died." "Claws? That woman don't want a husband. She wants an empire. Jacob's ranch is the biggest in 3 counties. She'd marry a fence post if it owned this much land." Clara watched Victoria glide toward the house, her movements practiced and precise. Everything about her screamed wealth-breeding superiority. Everything Clara wasn't. "Don't let her get under your skin," Ezra warned. "She's got a tongue sharp enough to cut glass, but she can't hurt you unless you let her." The knock came. Clara straightened her spine and opened the door. Victoria's eyes swept over Clara in a single dismissive glance. She took in the simple dress, the flower-dusted hands, the practical braid. "You must be the housekeeper," Victoria said. Her voice was honey poured over broken glass. "How charming! I'm here to see Mr. McAllister." "He's in the barn." "Then be a dear and fetch him for me." Victoria brushed past Clara into the house as if she owned it. "I'll wait in the parlor." Clara's hands clenched. She wanted to say something sharp, something cutting. But Ezra caught her eye and shook his head slightly. "I'll get Mr. McAllister," Clara said through gritted teeth. "Make yourself comfortable, Mrs. Ashworth." She walked out the back door before her temper got the better of her. Jacob was in the barn with Samuel examining a horse's hoof. Both of them looked up when Clara appeared. "You've got a visitor," Clara said. Her voice was flat. "Mrs. Victoria Ashworth. She's waiting in the parlor." Something flickered across Jacob's face. Annoyance. Resignation. Clara couldn't tell. Did she say what she wanted? "Didn't ask. She called me the housekeeper." Jacob's jaw tightened. "You're not the housekeeper." "I know what I am, Mr. McAllister. The question is whether you're going to tell her." She turned and walked back to the house before he could respond. Clara stayed in the kitchen while Victoria visited. She couldn't hear their conversation, but she could hear Victoria's laugh, high, artificial, designed to be heard. She could hear the murmur of voices, Jacob's low and brief, Victoria's animated and persistent. An hour passed, then another. When Victoria finally emerged, she paused in the kitchen doorway. Her eyes found Clara immediately. "I understand you're staying here," Victoria said. "You and your children." "9 of them," Clara said. 6 girls, 3 boys. "How remarkable." The word dripped with judgment. Jacob always did have a soft spot for strays. Clara set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables. "Mrs. Ashworth, was there something you needed?" Just a piece of advice, woman to woman. Victoria stepped closer, her smile never reaching her eyes. "Jacob McAllister is grieving. He's vulnerable. A man in his position needs protection from people who might take advantage. People like me." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Victoria's smile sharpened. "I've known Jacob for 15 years. I knew Elizabeth. I know what he needs, and it isn't a desperate widow with 9 mouths to feed hanging around his neck like a stone." She adjusted her gloves, casual, precise. "Enjoy your stay, Mrs. Thornton. I'm sure it won't last long." She swept out of the kitchen. A moment later, Clara heard the carriage drive away. Clara stood alone, gripping the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. "She's right," the voice in her head whispered. "You don't belong here. You're a burden. A charity case. The moment he realizes it, he'll send you away just like everyone else." "She's wrong, you know." Clara spun around. Jacob stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "How long have you been there?" Clara asked. "Long enough." He walked into the kitchen, stopped a few feet away from her. "Victoria Ashworth has been circling this ranch like a vulture since Elizabeth died. She doesn't care about me. She cares about my land, my money, my name. Maybe she cares about all of it. Maybe. But I don't care about her." Jacob's eyes met Clara's. I never have. Never will. Clara wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But 15 years of disappointment had taught her that wanting and having were different things. She thinks I'm taking advantage of you, Clara said quietly. Maybe she's right. I showed up with 9 children and nothing to offer. I took your food, your shelter, You took nothing. Jacob's voice was firm. I offered. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. He stepped closer. Close enough that Clara could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. Clara, I've been alone in this house for 5 years. 5 years of silence and grief and wishing I'd died with them. Then you showed up at that crossroads half-frozen, carrying a baby with 8 more children behind you, and you looked at me like I was just a man. Not a rich man, not a grieving man, just a man who could help. You were. To you, maybe. To Victoria, I'm a prize to be won. To the town, I'm a hermit who lost his mind with grief. To everyone else, I'm Jacob McAllister, timber baron rancher, wealthy eccentric. His voice dropped. You're the first person in 5 years who looked at me and saw, just Jacob. Clara's heart was pounding. She could feel it in her throat and her fingertips and every inch of her skin. I see you, she whispered. I see you. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them was charged electric, full of things neither of them was ready to say. Then Elijah burst through the door. Mama Samuel let me feed the horses, and one of them sneezed on me, and it was disgusting and amazing. The moment shattered. Clara stepped back, laughing despite herself, as Elijah launched into a detailed description of horse sneezes that required wild hand gestures and sound effects. Jacob watched them, something soft and wondering in his expression. And Clara thought maybe this could be real. 2 days later, everything changed. It started with Lily. Clara noticed at first the baby was fussy, refusing to nurse her skin warm to the touch. By evening, the warmth had become heat. By midnight, Lily was burning with fever. No, Clara whispered, pressing her palm to Lily's forehead. No, no, no. She knew this fever. She'd seen it before in the mining camp where William had worked. Children who burned like this one day were in the ground the next. Abigail! Clara's voice cracked. Abigail, wake your brothers. Get everyone up. The house erupted into chaos. Samuel appeared first, his hair wild from sleep. What's wrong? What happened? Lily's sick. Clara was already moving heating water, searching for the willow bark tea Ezra had shown her. She's burning up. I need cool cloths. I'll get them. Samuel was gone before she finished. Ezra appeared in his nightshirt, took one look at Lily, and his face went grim. How long? I don't know. Hours maybe. She was fine at supper. Fever comes fast in the little ones. Ezra started pulling herbs from the cabinet. I'll make a poultice. You keep her cool. The children gathered in the hallway, frightened faces peering around the door. Hannah was crying silently. Rebecca had her arms around Grace and Sarah. Thomas stood rigid, trying to be strong, failing. Jacob pushed through them. He took one look at Clara's face and understood. What do you need? A doctor. Clara's voice broke. Ezra's remedies might not be enough. She needs real medicine. She needs... Nearest doctor is in town. 2 hours on horseback. But in this weather... Jacob looked toward the window. Snow was falling heavily, had been falling since sundown. The pass might be blocked. Then we unblock it. Clara. That's my baby. Clara's eyes blazed. I didn't carry her through 3 days of blizzard to lose her now. I didn't walk through snow with 9 children just to watch one of them die in a warm bed. You either help me save her, or you get out of my way. Jacob held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. Samuel, he said, turning to the boy. Help Ezra with the medicine. Keep your mother supplied with whatever she needs. I'm riding to town. Clara grabbed his arm. You can't. The storm's getting worse. You'll freeze before you get halfway there. Maybe. Jacob. Clara. He covered her hand with his. His skin was warm, rough, steady. You saved your children by walking through a blizzard. Let me save one of them by riding through one. It's not the same. I had to go. You have a choice. No, I don't. His eyes held hers. I lost a son, Clara. I watched him burn with fever while I stood there helpless, unable to do a damn thing. I will not stand helpless again. Not while there's breath in my body. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to argue. She wanted to stop him. She wanted to hold him here where it was safe and warm. But she understood something about Jacob McAllister in that moment. Something she'd only glimpsed before. He needed to go. Not just for Lily. For William. For the little boy he couldn't save 5 years ago. For the chance to do now what he couldn't do then. Come back, she whispered. Promise me you'll come back. I promise. He squeezed her hand once, then released it. He was gone before she could change her mind, before she could beg him to stay, before she could tell him that somewhere in the last 2 weeks he'd become essential. Clara turned back to Lily, her heart splitting in two. One piece stayed with the baby in her arms. The other rode out into the storm with a man she was terrified to lose. The night stretched into eternity. Clara held Lily, walked with her, sang to her, prayed over her. Ezra's poultice helped a little. The fever dropped slightly, then surged again. The baby's breathing grew labored, her tiny chest working too hard. The children took turns keeping vigil. Samuel brought cool water every hour. Abigail prepared broth that Lily couldn't drink. Thomas read aloud from the Bible, stumbling over words, trying to offer comfort he didn't feel. Hannah organized the little ones, keeping them calm, keeping them quiet. Rebecca sang hymns in a voice that shook. Grace and Sarah fell asleep in a pile of blankets by the fire, too young to understand what was happening. And Elijah sat by the window watching for Jacob. He's coming back, Elijah said every hour. Mr. Jacob promised. He's coming back. Clara wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that promises meant something, that hope wasn't foolish, that the universe wasn't cruel enough to take everything she loved twice. But as the hours passed and the storm howled and Lily burned in her arms, belief felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Dawn came gray and bitter. Clara had stopped walking. She sat in the rocking chair by the fire, Lily pressed against her chest, both of them exhausted. The baby's fever hadn't broken. Her breathing was shallow now, fast and weak. Mama. Samuel's voice was hoarse. He'd been up all night. They all had. Mama, you should rest. Let me hold her. I can't. You're falling apart. Then I fall apart holding my daughter. Samuel knelt beside the chair. At 16, he was almost a man, had been forced into manhood years too soon. But in this moment, looking at his mother's devastated face, he was just a boy who didn't know how to fix what was broken. She's going to be okay, he said. Lily's strong. She survived the walk. She survived everything. She's not going to quit now. What if she does? Clara's voice cracked. What if she quits? What if I lose her? How do I tell Grace and Sarah their baby sister is gone? How do I explain to Elijah why God takes little children? You don't. Samuel took his mother's hand. You don't explain. You just keep going. That's what you taught us. When Daddy died, when we lost the house, when everything fell apart, you just kept going. One foot in front of the other. That's what you said. Clara's tears fell onto Lily's blanket. I'm so tired of going, Samuel. I'm so tired of being strong. Then be tired. Samuel's voice was gentle. Be tired and weak and scared. We'll be strong for you this time. That's what family does. Clara looked at her son, this boy, who had carried his baby sister through a blizzard, who had shouldered responsibility no child should bear, who had never once complained about the hand life dealt him. She pulled him close with her free arm and held him. I love you, she whispered. I love all of you. Whatever happens, you need to know that." "We know, Mama." Samuel's voice was muffled against her shoulder. "We've always known." They stayed like that, mother and son, until Ezra's voice cut through the silence. "Someone's coming." Clara's head snapped up. Elijah was already at the window, face pressed against the glass. "It's him. It's Mr. Jacob. He's back." Clara couldn't move. She was afraid to hope, afraid to believe. But then the door burst open, and Jacob stumbled through. He looked half dead. His face was gray with cold, his beard crusted with ice, his hands swollen and clumsy. He could barely stand, had to catch himself on the doorframe. But in his frozen hand, he held a small bottle. "Doctor's medicine," he gasped. 2 drops, every 4 hours. He said it should work. He said. His legs gave out. Samuel caught him before he hit the floor. Clara was already moving, taking the bottle from his frozen fingers, reading the label with shaking hands. She administered the first 2 drops to Lily's cracked lips. Then she turned to Jacob, still slumped against Samuel, barely conscious. "You fool," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You beautiful, reckless fool. You almost died." Jacob's eyes found hers. Even half-frozen, delirious with exhaustion, he managed a ghost of a smile. "Told you," he mumbled. "I promised." Then he passed out cold. Clara looked at Ezra. "Get him by the fire. Get those clothes off. We need to warm him slowly, or he'll lose his fingers." "What about Lily?" Clara looked at her baby, then at the man who had ridden through a blizzard to save her. "Samuel, hold your sister. Keep her warm. Give her the medicine every 4 hours." She transferred Lily to Samuel's arms, then turned to Jacob's unconscious form. "I'll take care of him." "Mama." Samuel's voice stopped her. "Is he going to be okay?" Clara looked at Jacob. This man who had walked into her life 2 weeks ago and turned everything upside down. This man who had offered shelter without conditions, warmth without judgment, hope without limits. This man she couldn't lose. "He has to be," she said quietly. "He has to be." She knelt beside him and began the slow work of saving the man who had just saved her daughter. Lily's fever broke at noon the next day. Clara was sitting beside Jacob's bed, pressing warm cloths to his frozen hands, when Samuel appeared in the doorway with tears streaming down his face. "Mama!" His voice cracked. "Mama, she's cool. Lily's cool. The fever's gone." Clara's breath stopped. She looked at Samuel, afraid to believe, afraid to hope. "You're sure?" "I checked 3 times. Ezra checked twice. She's nursing again, Mama. She's eating." Clara covered her mouth with her hand. A sound escaped her, something between a sob and a laugh, a release of terror she'd been holding for 2 days. "Go to her." Jacob's voice rasped from the bed. "Go see your baby." Clara turned. Jacob was awake, his eyes barely open, his face still gray with exhaustion. But he was conscious. He was alive. "Your hands. We'll still be here when you get back." He managed a weak smile. "Go, Clara. Go hold your daughter." Clara hesitated for 1 heartbeat. Then she ran. She found Lily in Abigail's arms, surrounded by all her siblings. The baby was awake, alert, her eyes bright and clear. When Clara took her, Lily cooed and reached for her mother's face with tiny fingers. Clara sank to the floor, clutching her baby, and wept. The children gathered around her. Hannah pressed against her left side. Rebecca leaned against her right. Thomas stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. Samuel knelt in front, his arms around as many siblings as he could reach. Grace and Sarah climbed into the pile. Elijah wrapped himself around Clara's back. Even Abigail, always so composed, let tears fall freely. 9 children and their mother tangled together on the floor, crying and laughing and holding on. "We're okay," Clara whispered into Lily's hair. "We're okay. We're okay." And for the first time since William died, she believed it. Jacob's recovery was slower. The frostbite had done damage not permanent, Ezra assured them, but painful. His fingers blistered and peeled. His cheeks bore red patches that would take weeks to heal. He couldn't grip anything, couldn't work, couldn't do much of anything except sit by the fire and let Clara bring him soup. He hated every minute of it. "I'm not an invalid," Jacob growled on the third day when Clara caught him trying to button his own shirt. "You're a man with frostbitten fingers who can't feel his thumbs." Clara gently pushed his hands away and finished the buttons herself. "There's a difference. I rode through a blizzard. I can button a shirt. You rode through a blizzard and nearly died. Now you sit down and let people help you." She met his eyes. "This is what happens when you save babies. You get fussed over. Accept it." Jacob's jaw tightened, but something in his expression softened. "You're enjoying this." "I'm enjoying you being alive to complain about it." Clara's voice dropped. "Don't you dare make me regret that." They looked at each other. The air between them grew heavy, charged with things neither of them was ready to name. "Clara." Jacob's voice was rough. "I need to tell you something." "You need to rest." "I need to say this." He caught her hand clumsily with bandaged fingers but firmly. "When I was riding through that storm, I thought I was going to die. The cold was so bad I couldn't feel my horse anymore. I couldn't see the road. I couldn't see anything except white." Clara's throat tightened. "Jacob, let me finish. Let me." His eyes held hers. "I thought about Elizabeth, about William. I thought maybe I was riding to meet them. Maybe this was how it was supposed to end, me dying in the snow trying to save a child the way I couldn't save my own." Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks. She didn't try to stop them. "But then I thought about you," Jacob continued. "I thought about your face when I left. The way you looked at me. The way you said, 'Come back,' like it was the only thing that mattered." His grip tightened. "And I realized I wasn't riding to die. I was riding to live. For the first time in 5 years I wanted to live." "Jacob," Clara's voice broke. "You gave that to me." His bandaged thumb brushed across her knuckles. "You and those 9 children. You gave me a reason to come back." Clara didn't know what to say. Words felt too small for what was happening in her chest, this terrifying, wonderful expansion of hope. So she didn't say anything. She just leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. They stayed like that for a long moment. Two people who had walked through their own blizzards finally finding shelter in each other. Then Elijah's voice echoed from downstairs. "Mama, Mr. Jacob, there's people coming." The moment shattered. Clara pulled back, wiping her eyes. Jacob was already trying to stand. "Stay here," Clara said. "You're not strong enough. Like hell I'm not." Jacob pushed himself up, swaying slightly. "If someone's coming to my house, I meet them at my door." Clara saw the steel in his eyes and knew arguing was pointless. She offered her shoulder instead. "Lean on me." "I don't need." "Jacob McAllister, you take my arm or I'll knock you back into that bed myself." Something flickered in his expression, almost a smile. He took her arm. They walked downstairs together, Clara bearing more of his weight than he'd ever admit. The sight that greeted them made Clara's stomach drop. Through the front window, she could see 5 riders approaching. She recognized Victoria Ashworth's elegant silhouette immediately. Beside her rode a man in a dark coat, Reverend Josiah Crane, the preacher from town. And leading the group on a horse that probably cost more than most men's homes was a man Clara didn't recognize. But Jacob did. Cornelius Whitmore. His voice hardened. "Son of a bitch." "Who is he?" Clara asked. "Owns the bank in town. Been trying to buy this ranch since Elizabeth died." Jacob's jaw tightened. "We had words last year when he tried to foreclose on 3 families who couldn't make payments. I paid their debts myself." "So he hates you?" "He hates that he can't control me." Jacob straightened, pulling away from Clara's support. "Whatever happens, don't let them see you scared." "I'm not scared." "Good." Jacob opened the door and stepped onto the porch. Because they're about to be. But Clara saw what Jacob couldn't see: the slight tremor in his hands, the way his shoulders had tensed, the shadow that crossed his face. Whatever courage he was summoning, it was costing him. The riders stopped in front of the house. Cornelius Whitmore was a thin man with sharp features and cold eyes. He wore his wealth like armor, expensive coat, gold watch chain, leather gloves that had never seen honest work. His smile was the smile of a man who believed he'd already won. "Jacob." His voice was smooth, practiced. "Heard you had a rough few days. Riding through blizzards at your age, dangerous business. I'm 42, Whitmore. Not dead. Not yet." Whitmore's eyes slid to Clara, standing just behind Jacob in the doorway. "And this must be the woman everyone's been talking about. Mrs. Thornton. Is it the widow with all those children?" Clara didn't flinch. 9 children, 6 girls, 3 boys. You want their names too, or are you done counting? Something flickered in Whitmore's expression. Surprise, maybe. He wasn't used to poor women talking back. "Spirited." Victoria Ashworth's voice dripped with false sweetness. "How charming. Jacob always did like his women feisty." "Watch your mouth, Victoria." Jacob's voice was low, dangerous. "I'm only stating facts." Victoria dismounted, brushing snow from her expensive coat. "The whole territory is talking Jacob. A widow with 9 children living in your house, sleeping under your roof. What are people supposed to think? I don't give a damn what people think." "But you should." Reverend Crane stepped forward. He was a soft man, round-faced, with eyes that never quite met yours. "Jacob, we're here as friends. As your community. We're concerned about your spiritual welfare." "My spiritual welfare?" "A man of your standing living with an unmarried woman." Crane spread his hands in a gesture of false compassion. "It sets a poor example. It invites gossip. It damages the moral fabric of our town." "The moral fabric?" Jacob's voice was flat. "You mean the fabric that let 3 families almost lose their homes because Whitmore here wanted their land? That moral fabric. This isn't about past disagreements." Whitmore cut in smoothly. "This is about what's happening now. Mrs. Thornton has a reputation. We've all heard the stories from her previous town. Her husband's death. The whispers about bad luck following her. The children born in poverty and scandal." Clara felt the words like blows, but she kept her face still. She'd heard these accusations before. She'd survived them before. "We're simply suggesting," Whitmore continued, "that it might be better for everyone if Mrs. Thornton and her children found somewhere else to stay. Somewhere more appropriate." Jacob was silent. Clara looked at him. His face had gone pale. His hands were shaking, not from frostbite this time, but from something else. Something that looked like fear. She knew that look. She'd seen it on her own face in mirrors and windows in the surface of still water. It was the look of someone who'd been broken once and was terrified of being broken again. "Jacob." Victoria's voice softened, became almost gentle, a predator feigning sympathy. "We understand. You've been lonely. You've been grieving. This woman took advantage of that grief, brought her troubles into your home, used your kindness against you. But it's not too late. Send her away, and we can forget this ever happened. Your reputation will recover. Your standing in the community will be restored." Jacob's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Clara watched him struggle, watched the battle playing out behind his eyes. The fear of judgment warring with something else, something stronger. But the fear was winning. She could see it. The way his shoulders hunched, the way his eyes dropped. 5 years of hiding. 5 years of letting grief be his shield. 5 years of avoiding the world, because the world had whispered behind his back after Elizabeth died. He was folding. Right in front of her eyes, he was folding. And Clara understood in that moment that she couldn't wait for him to save her. She had to save herself. Clara stepped forward past Jacob onto the porch. "You want me to leave?" Her voice was steady, stronger than she felt. "Fine, I'll leave. But not because you told me to. Not because you have the right to judge me. I'll leave because I've been leaving my whole life, and I know how to walk away with my head held high." Whitmore's smile widened. "A wise decision, Mrs. I'm not finished." The smile faltered. Clara descended the porch steps. She walked toward the group of riders, her worn boots crunching in the snow, her thin dress offering no protection against the cold. "You want to talk about reputation?" She stopped in front of Whitmore's horse, looking up at him. "Let's talk about yours. Let's talk about the families you've thrown out of their homes, the businesses you've crushed, the lives you've ruined because you wanted more land, more money, more power." "Mrs. Thornton, let's talk about you, Reverend." Clara turned to Crane. "Let's talk about how you preach grace on Sunday and gossip on Monday. How you tell your congregation to love their neighbors while you help men like Whitmore destroy them. How you speak for God but act for gold." Crane's face went red. "How dare you? How dare I?" Clara's voice rose. "How dare I, the widow? How dare I, the woman with 9 children and no husband? How dare I speak when men like you have decided I don't have the right?" She turned to face them all. Victoria with her expensive clothes and empty heart. The Reverend with his false piety. The banker with his cold calculations. The 2 townsmen who wouldn't meet her eyes. "You came here to save Jacob McAllister from me. To rescue him from the desperate widow who's dragging him down." Clara's voice broke, but she kept going. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know that I buried a husband who died saving other men's lives. You don't know that I walked 3 days through a blizzard with 9 children because no town would give us shelter. You don't know that I have cooked, cleaned, mended, and worked every single day to earn my place in this house." Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice stayed strong. "I am not a burden. I am not a scandal. I am not bad luck or ruin or whatever ugly thing you want to call me." She drew herself up to her full height. "I am Clara Elizabeth Thornton. I am a mother of 9 children, and I will not be driven away by people who have never known a day of hardship in their comfortable, cruel lives." Silence fell. Whitmore's smile had vanished. Victoria looked uncertain for the first time. The Reverend couldn't meet Clara's eyes. Then a small voice broke the silence. "Mama." Clara turned. Samuel stood on the porch. Behind him, one by one, her children emerged from the house. Abigail holding Lily. Thomas with his hand on Elijah's shoulder. Hannah gripping Rebecca's hand. Grace and Sarah clinging to each other. 9 children, 6 girls, 3 boys. Samuel walked down the steps and stood beside his mother. He was 16, tall for his age, with his father's jaw and his mother's eyes. "My mother's not going anywhere," he said quietly. "And neither are we." Abigail joined them, Lily cradled against her chest. "If you want to send us away, you'll have to look this baby in the eyes and tell her she doesn't deserve a home." Thomas stepped forward. "My mother's worked harder than any of you ever have. She's earned more than you could ever give." One by one, the children lined up beside Clara. Hannah and Rebecca. Grace and Sarah holding hands. Elijah, small but fierce, glaring at the adults who wanted to take his family away. 9 children standing in the snow, united against the world. Clara looked at them. These children she'd carried, nursed, protected, loved. These children who had every reason to be broken, but had chosen to be brave instead. Her heart cracked open with pride. Then Jacob's voice came from behind them. "Get off my land." Clara turned. Jacob had come down from the porch. He was walking toward them, unsteady, but determined, his face transformed. The fear was gone. In its place was something Clara had never seen before. Rage. "Jacob, be reasonable," Whitmore started. "I said get off my land." Jacob's voice was iron. "You come to my home. You insult a woman under my protection. You threaten children who have done nothing except survive." He stopped in front of Whitmore's horse. "I should have done this years ago." "Done what?" "Stood up." Jacob's eyes blazed. "I spent 5 years hiding from people like you. Hiding from judgment, from whispers, from the whole damn world. I let you think my grief made me weak. I let you circle my ranch like vultures waiting for me to fall." He turned to look at Clara, at the children lined up beside her. "But I'm not falling anymore. This woman didn't drag me down. She lifted me up. She and her children brought life back into a house that was dying. They gave me something I lost 5 years ago: hope, family, a reason to keep breathing." Jacob turned back to Whitmore. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. You're going to go back to town and tell everyone that Clara Thornton and her children are under my protection. Anyone who speaks against them speaks against me. Anyone who tries to harm them will answer to me personally. You can't threaten. I'm not threatening. I'm promising." Jacob stepped closer to Whitmore's horse. "You know what I did in the war, Cornelius. You know what I'm capable of. Don't make me remind you." The banker's face had gone pale. Whatever history existed between these two men, it was enough to make Whitmore afraid. "This isn't over, McAllister." "Yes, it is." Jacob's voice was quiet now, almost soft. "You have no power here. Not anymore. Now get off my land before I decide to stop being civil." Whitmore jerked his horse's reins. Without another word, he rode away. The Reverend followed red-faced and silent. Victoria lingered. She looked at Jacob with something like genuine hurt in her eyes. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "This woman will never be what Elizabeth was." "You're right," Jacob said. "She won't be Elizabeth. She'll be Clara. And that's exactly what I need." Victoria's expression hardened. She turned her horse and rode away without looking back. The two townsmen exchanged glances, then followed. Silence settled over the ranch. Clara stood in the snow, surrounded by her children, watching the riders disappear into the distance. Then she felt a hand on her shoulder. Jacob was beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. His hand was still bandaged, still clumsy, but his grip was steady. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I froze. When they first came, I froze. I let fear make me small again. You came back. You showed me how." His eyes met hers. "You stood there alone against all of them. You didn't flinch. You didn't bend. You just stood. I've had practice. I know." His voice dropped. "Clara, what I said before about you giving me a reason to live, I meant every word. And I'm going to spend however long it takes proving that to you." Clara looked at him. This man who had ridden through a blizzard to save her baby, who had just faced down his enemies for her, who was looking at her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. "You already proved it," she whispered. "The moment you stopped at that crossroads." Jacob's hand moved from her shoulder to her cheek. His bandaged fingers were gentle, trembling slightly. "Mama," Rebecca's small voice interrupted. "Can we go inside now? It's really cold." Clara laughed a real laugh, surprised and bright and full of relief. Jacob smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "Yes, sweetheart," Clara said. "Let's go inside." The family walked toward the house together. 9 children, 2 adults, 1 future they were just beginning to build. As Clara reached the porch, she turned to look back at the road where Whitmore and his group had disappeared. They would be back. She knew that. This battle was won, but the war wasn't over. But for the first time in her life, Clara wasn't facing that war alone. She had her children. She had Jacob. And she had something she'd stopped believing in years ago: hope. 2 weeks passed in fragile peace. Jacob's hands healed slowly. The blisters faded. The swelling went down, and by the middle of December, he could grip a hammer again. Clara caught him in the barn one morning, testing his strength on fence repairs, his jaw set with determination. "Ezra said another week of rest," she said from the doorway. "Ezra's not the one going crazy sitting by the fire." Jacob drove a nail into the wood. His hand shook slightly, but he didn't stop. I've got work to do. You've got a ranch full of workers who can do it for you. That's not the point. He set down the hammer, flexed his fingers. The point is being useful, contributing something. I spent 5 years being a ghost in my own house. I'm done with that. Clara walked closer. She understood what he wasn't saying, that usefulness was how men like Jacob measured their worth, that sitting idle felt like dying by inches. Then let me help, she said. Show me what needs doing. I'm stronger than I look. Jacob studied her face, Whatever he saw there made something in his expression soften. You're stronger than most men I know. He handed her a brush. Start with the horses. They've been neglected while I was laid up. They worked side by side in comfortable silence. Clara found she liked the rhythm of it, the physical labor, the smell of hay and horses, the simple satisfaction of tasks completed. It reminded her of the early days of her marriage, when she and William had built their first home with their own hands. You're thinking about him, Jacob said quietly. Your husband. Clara's brush stilled. How did you know? Your face changes when you remember, goes soft around the edges. He kept his eyes on the horse he was grooming. I'm not jealous if that's what you're worried about. A woman who forgets her first love isn't worth having. I don't compare you to him. Maybe you should. Jacob's voice was rough. William sounds like he was a good man, better than me probably. He died saving people. I just survived. Clara set down her brush. She walked around the horse until she was standing in front of Jacob, close enough to see the doubt in his eyes. You rode through a blizzard to save my daughter. You stood up to the most powerful man in the territory to protect my family. You opened your home to 9 children and never once complained about the noise or the chaos or the expense. She reached up, touched his cheek. You're a good man, Jacob McAllister. Different from William, but no less worthy. Jacob's hand came up to cover hers. His palm was rough, calloused, warm. Clara. His voice dropped. I need to ask you something. Ask. When this is over, when Whitmore gives up, when the town accepts you, when everything settles, what do you want for yourself? Not for your children, for you. Clara had never been asked that question, not once in her entire life. She'd been a daughter, a wife, a mother, a widow. She'd been defined by her relationships to others, by her responsibilities, by her survival. What did she want? I want to stop running, she said slowly. I want to wake up in the morning and know where I'll be sleeping that night. I want my children to have a home that no one can take from them. She paused. I want to feel safe. Is that all? Clara looked at him. Really looked past the weathered face and gray eyes, past the scars and the grief to the man underneath. No, she whispered. That's not all. Jacob leaned closer. His breath was warm on her face. His eyes asked a question his lips weren't ready to speak. Mama, Mr. Jacob. They sprang apart. Thomas was running toward the barn, his face flushed with exertion. Mama, there's a wagon coming. Ezra says it's from town. Clara's stomach dropped. Whitmore. No, ma'am, it's Mrs. Sullivan, the lady who owns the general store. Clara and Jacob exchanged looks. Martha Sullivan, the elderly widow Ezra had mentioned weeks ago, respected, sharp-tongued, influential. What was she doing here? They walked out to meet the wagon. Martha Sullivan was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She sat ramrod straight on the wagon seat, driving her own horses despite her age. When she saw Jacob and Clara emerge from the barn, she pulled to a stop and studied them with frank assessment. Jacob McAllister. Her voice was crisp. You look like death warmed over. Nice to see you too, Martha. Don't you sass me, boy. I changed your diapers same as Ezra did. She turned her sharp gaze to Clara. And you must be the widow everyone's been gossiping about. Clara Thornton. Clara lifted her chin. That's right. 9 children, they say. 6 girls, 3 boys. The oldest is 16, the youngest is 6 months. Martha's eyebrows rose. And you walked 3 days through a blizzard with all of them. I did what I had to do. Something flickered in Martha's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Well, she said, climbing down from the wagon with surprising agility for her age. I came to see for myself. Whitmore's been running his mouth all over town saying you're a gold digger who seduced poor grieving Jacob. Victoria's been adding her own poison, says you're common, vulgar, unfit for decent company. Clara's jaw tightened. And what do you think? Martha looked at her for a long moment. Then she laughed a sharp, surprised sound. I think you've got more backbone than half the men in this territory. She reached into her wagon and pulled out a basket. I also think those children of yours need feeding. I brought supplies, flour, sugar, salt, pork, some fabric for clothes. Consider it a welcome gift. Clara stared at the basket. I don't understand. You came all this way to bring us gifts. After everything Whitmore's been saying. Cornelius Whitmore is a snake who'd sell his own mother for profit. I've known that man for 30 years, and I've never trusted him for a single minute. Martha's voice hardened. He's been trying to take over this territory one ranch at a time. Jacob's the only one with enough land and money to stand against him. That's why he wants Jacob ruined, not because of you. You're just the weapon he's using. Jacob stepped forward. What are you saying, Martha? I'm saying this isn't about scandal. It's about power. Martha handed the basket to Clara. Whitmore's been buying up debt all over the county, calling in loans early, forcing families off their land. He's building an empire, and you're in his way. So he attacks Clara to get to me. Exactly. Drive away your support, isolate, you make you weak. Then he moves in for the kill. Martha's eyes were hard. I've seen him do it before. 3 families lost everything last year because of his schemes. Good people, hard-working people destroyed because they couldn't pay debts that weren't even due yet. Clara felt cold, despite the weak winter sun. Why are you telling us this? Because I'm tired of watching that man win. Martha looked at Clara, then at Jacob. And because I remember what this territory used to be. Neighbors helping neighbors. Communities taking care of their own. That's gone now, replaced by greed and gossip. But it doesn't have to stay gone. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is a list. Names of families Whitmore has hurt. People who might be willing to stand against him if someone gave them reason to hope. She handed it to Jacob. You've got money. You've got influence. Use it. Build something stronger than what he's tearing down. Jacob looked at the list, then at Martha. Why me? Because Elizabeth would have wanted you to. Martha's voice softened. She was my friend Jacob. She came to my store every week, talked about her dreams for this place. She wanted to build a community, a real one. She didn't get the chance. Martha looked at Clara. Maybe you and this woman can finish what Elizabeth started. Clara's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say. Jacob was silent for a long moment. Then he folded the paper and put it in his pocket. Thank you, Martha. This means more than you know. Don't thank me yet. Whitmore won't take this lying down. He'll come at you harder now that you've shown you're willing to fight. Martha climbed back onto her wagon. But at least you won't be alone. She drove away without looking back. Clara watched the wagon disappear, her mind racing. This was bigger than scandal, bigger than gossip. This was war, and she and her children were caught in the middle. Jacob? Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. What are we going to do? Jacob took her hand. His grip was firm, certain. We're going to fight. The fighting started 3 days later. Jacob rode into town with Samuel to buy supplies. When they returned, Jacob's face was grim, and Samuel looked ready to hit someone. What happened? Clara asked. Whitmore's called in our credit at the general store. Jacob dismounted his movements, stiff with anger. Martha can't extend us terms anymore. He's pressuring her suppliers to cut her off if she does business with us. Can he do that? He owns the bank. He can do whatever he wants. Clara felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. What do? We pay cash. We stretch what we have. We survive. For how long? Jacob didn't answer. He didn't have to. They both knew the truth. Even Jacob's considerable wealth had limits. If Whitmore could cut off their supplies, their options, their connections to the outside world. There's more, Samuel said quietly. His young face was troubled. We heard talk in town. Whitmore's offering to buy out any rancher who's in debt to him. He's also spreading rumors that Mr. Jacob's going crazy, that he's taken in a witch woman and her brood of demon children. Demon children? Clara's voice rose. People are scared, Mama. Samuel met her eyes. Scared people believe stupid things. Clara thought of her children. Of Grace and Sarah, who still believed the world was kind. Of Elijah, who asked endless questions about everything. Of Lily, who was just learning to smile. Demon children. Because their mother was poor, and their father was dead, and they'd had the audacity to survive. Something hardened inside Clara. Something that had been soft before, worn down by years of running and apologizing and trying to make herself small. No more. Then we change what people believe, she said. Jacob looked at her. How? Martha said Elizabeth wanted to build a community. Real neighbors helping real neighbors. Clara's mind was racing. What if we gave them something to believe in? Something bigger than Whitmore's lies? I'm listening. Christmas is in 2 weeks. What if we opened the ranch? Invited everyone, the families on Martha's list, anyone who's been hurt by Whitmore, anyone who's been too scared to stand up. We feed them. We show them what this place can be. We prove that we're not demons, we're just people trying to survive same as them. Jacob was quiet, considering. Then a slow smile crossed his face. Elizabeth would have loved that idea. Is that a yes? That's a hell yes. He turned to Samuel. Ride back to town. Tell Martha Sullivan we're throwing a Christmas gathering at the McAllister Ranch. Everyone's invited. Tell her to spread the word. Samuel grinned, the first real grin Clara had seen on his face in weeks. Yes, sir. He was gone before Clara could stop him. The next 2 weeks were chaos. Clara had organized plenty of meals in her life, but never for 100 people. She worked from dawn to midnight, baking bread, preparing dishes, stretching supplies to their limits. Ezra worked beside her, sharing recipes. Elizabeth had loved teaching Clara the secrets of feeding crowds. The children helped in ways Clara hadn't expected. Abigail became her second in command, managing the younger ones, while Clara cooked. Thomas kept meticulous lists of supplies and costs. Hannah and Rebecca decorated the house with pine boughs and berries they gathered from the woods. Samuel and Jacob worked together on the barn clearing space for tables and seating. They built benches, repaired doors, hung lanterns, until the whole structure glowed with warmth. And Elijah, irrepressible Elijah, appointed himself official taste tester for every dish that came out of the kitchen. Someone's got to make sure it's good enough, he said solemnly, when Clara caught him sneaking a third cookie. Someone's got to stop eating the inventory. That's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. Even Jacob laughed at that. But beneath the activity, tension hummed. Every day brought new rumors from town. Whitmore was furious about the gathering. He'd threatened to foreclose on anyone who attended. He'd pressured the Reverend to denounce the event from the pulpit. And Victoria Ashworth had been seen riding toward the McAllister Ranch, though she'd turned back before arriving. Whatever she was planning, she hadn't shown her hand yet. You're worried, Jacob said on the night before Christmas Eve. They were standing on the porch, watching the stars emerge. The children were asleep. The house was quiet. Aren't you? Terrified. He turned to look at her. But not about Whitmore. Not about Victoria. Not even about losing the ranch. Then what? Losing this. His gesture encompassed everything. The house, the land, the sleeping children, Clara herself. I didn't know I wanted it until I had it. Now I can't imagine going back to what I was before." Clara's heart ached. "Jacob, I know it's too soon. I know there are 100 reasons why this is complicated. You're still grieving William. I'm still figuring out who I am without Elizabeth. Your children need stability, not another upheaval. But I'm falling in love with you anyway." His voice cracked. "I'm falling in love with your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you never give up. I'm falling in love with your children, with the way they've filled this house with noise and laughter and life. I'm falling in love with the person I'm becoming because of you." Clara couldn't breathe. "You don't have to say anything," Jacob continued. "You don't have to feel the same way. I just needed you to know before tomorrow, before whatever happens, I love you, Clara Thornton. Whatever comes next, that's not going to change." Clara looked at him. This man who had pulled her from the snow, who had ridden through a blizzard for her daughter, who had stood up to his enemies for her family. "Jacob McAllister," she said quietly. "I've been falling in love with you since the moment you said, 'Then follow me home.'" His breath caught. "I was just too scared to admit it," she continued. "Too scared that it wouldn't last. That you'd realize I'm not worth the trouble. That you'd wake up one day and wish you'd left me at that crossroads." "Never." His voice was fierce. "I will never wish that." "I'm starting to believe you." He reached for her, and this time nothing interrupted them. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close. She pressed her face against his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady, strong, real. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Jacob murmured into her hair. "We face it together." "Together," Clara agreed. They stood like that for a long time, two people who had found each other in the wilderness, holding on as if they'd never let go. Christmas Eve dawned cold and clear. By noon, the first wagons began arriving. Clara watched from the window, her heart in her throat, counting families as they came down the road. One wagon, then two, then 5. "They're coming," she whispered. "Did you think they wouldn't?" Jacob stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "I didn't know. After everything Whitmore threatened. People are tired of being afraid." Jacob squeezed her shoulder. "You gave them permission to hope. That's worth more than Whitmore's threats." By mid-afternoon, the barn was full. Clara moved through the crowd, greeting families, serving food, introducing her children. She met the Hendersons, who had almost lost their farm to Whitmore's schemes. She met the Garcia's immigrants, who had been treated as outsiders until today. She met the Watsons, whose daughter was the same age as Rebecca, and immediately became her friend. Everywhere she looked, she saw people reaching out to each other, sharing food, sharing stories, sharing the simple warmth of community. "You did this," Martha Sullivan said, appearing at Clara's elbow. The old woman's eyes were suspiciously bright. "You and Jacob, this is what I've been waiting years to see. It's just a gathering. It's more than that, and you know it." Martha looked around the barn. "Look at them. Families who've been too scared to talk to each other. Neighbors who forgot how to be neighbors. You're reminding them who they can be." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I just wanted to prove we're not demons." "Honey, you've proved a lot more than that." Martha patted her arm. "Now go find that man of yours. I think he's looking for you." Clara found Jacob near the barn doors, watching the crowd with an expression she couldn't read. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking Elizabeth would have cried if she could see this." His voice was rough with emotion. "I'm thinking she's probably watching from somewhere, happy that her dream finally came true." "It's your dream now too." "No." He turned to look at her, and his eyes were shining. "It's ours." Then Elijah's voice cut through the noise. "Mama! Mr. Jacob! There's more people coming." Clara looked toward the road. Her blood ran cold. Cornelius Whitmore was riding toward the ranch, flanked by the Reverend Victoria Ashworth, and a dozen men Clara didn't recognize. They weren't coming to celebrate. They were coming for war. Get the children inside, Jacob said quietly. Jacob. Now Clara. Whatever happens, the children stay safe. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to stand beside him the way she had before. But she looked at the hard faces of the approaching riders, and she knew he was right. She gathered her children. She herded them toward the house, and she prayed that the hope they'd built wouldn't be destroyed before the night was over. Jacob stepped forward to meet them. The families in the barn had gone quiet. Children pressed against their mothers. Men moved toward the doors, uncertain, afraid. Years of Whitmore's power hung in the air like a threat. Clara watched from the porch, her children gathered behind her. Samuel stood at her shoulder, his jaw tight. Abigail held Lily close. The younger ones huddled together, sensing danger they couldn't name. "Stay here," Clara told them. "No matter what happens, stay here." "Mama," Samuel started. "Promise me." Samuel's eyes met hers. He saw something there that made him nod. "I promise." Clara walked toward the barn. Whitmore had dismounted. He stood in front of Jacob, that cold smile on his face, surrounded by his men. Victoria hung back watching. The Reverend clutched his Bible like a shield. "Jacob." Whitmore's voice carried across the silent crowd. "I see you've thrown yourself quite a party, celebrating your descent into madness. I'm celebrating Christmas with my neighbors." Jacob's voice was steady. "You're welcome to join us. There's plenty of food. I didn't come to eat." Whitmore looked around at the gathered families, letting his gaze linger on each face. "I came to remind these good people what happens when they defy me." "You mean what happens when they stop being afraid of you?" Whitmore's smile flickered. "Careful, McAllister. You're already on thin ice. That woman of yours has made you reckless. That woman has made me brave. There's a difference." Clara reached Jacob's side. She felt the tension radiating from his body, but his voice never wavered. "Mrs. Thornton." Whitmore turned his attention to her. "The widow who's caused so much trouble. Tell me, was this your plan all along? Find a wealthy fool, seduce him, steal his fortune?" "My plan was to keep my children alive." Clara's voice rang clear. "Everything else happened by accident." How touching. The desperate mother fighting for her brood. Whitmore stepped closer. "But desperation makes people dangerous. It makes them do things they shouldn't, take things that don't belong to them." "I haven't taken anything." "You've taken his reputation, his standing in this community, his judgment." Whitmore's eyes glittered. "You've turned one of the most respected men in this territory into a laughingstock, a fool who lets a beggar woman and her 9 bastards run his household." Clara felt the word like a slap. Bastards. Her children. William's children, reduced to an insult. Something inside her snapped. "My children are not bastards." Her voice was ice. "They are the sons and daughters of William Thornton, who died saving 3 men from a collapsed mine. They carry his name, his blood, his courage. And I will not stand here and let you dishonor their father's memory." The crowd stirred. Someone murmured agreement. Whitmore's smile faded. "You forget your place, woman." "No, you forget yours." Clara stepped forward, and Whitmore actually stepped back. "You think you own this territory? You think your money gives you the right to destroy families, steal land, crush anyone who stands in your way? I think power belongs to those who know how to use it." "Then you don't understand power at all." Clara gestured toward the families in the barn. "Power isn't money. It isn't land. It isn't the ability to make people afraid. Power is this people choosing to stand together. People deciding they've had enough. People remembering that they don't have to face the darkness alone." She turned to face the crowd. "I know who I am. I'm a widow. I'm poor. I came to this territory with nothing but my children and my stubborn will to survive. Every town I passed through looked at me and saw burden, saw shame, saw someone to be pitied or despised." Her voice grew stronger. But Jacob McAllister looked at me and saw something different. He saw a woman worth saving. He saw children worth protecting. He saw a family worth fighting for. She looked at Jacob, her heart in her eyes. He gave us a home when no one else would. He stood up for us when everyone else turned away. And I am done apologizing for accepting his kindness. Martha Sullivan stepped forward from the crowd. The woman speaks truth. Her voice was sharp, clear. I've known Jacob McAllister his whole life. I've never seen him happier than he's been these past weeks. If that's what this woman has done to him, then I say God bless her. Another voice rose. Mr. Henderson, the farmer who'd almost lost everything. Whitmore threatened to foreclose on my land if I came here tonight. I came anyway, because I'm tired of living in fear. Tired of letting one man decide who deserves to survive and who doesn't. More voices joined. My family would have starved last winter if Jacob hadn't paid our debts. Whitmore charged my wife double for medicine when our son was sick. Said it was market rate. He's been bleeding this territory dry for years. When does it end? The crowd was shifting, moving. People who had been afraid were finding their voices. People who had been silent were stepping forward. Whitmore's face had gone pale. His men shifted uneasily. You're making a mistake, he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. All of you. I have resources you can't imagine. I can destroy every family here. Then destroy us. The voice came from the back of the crowd. A young man Clara didn't recognize pushed forward. Destroy all of us, because we're done. We're done being scared. We're done letting you decide who matters and who doesn't. We're done. The crowd roared agreement. Whitmore looked around at the faces surrounding him. Angry faces, determined. Faces that had finally found their courage. For the first time, Clara saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. This isn't over, he said, backing toward his horse. You'll regret this. All of you. Maybe. Jacob's voice was calm. But at least we'll regret it together. Whitmore mounted his horse. His men followed. Victoria hesitated, looking at Jacob with something that might have been regret. You could have had so much more, she said quietly. With me, you could have had everything. I already have everything. Jacob took Clara's hand. I just didn't know it until she showed me. Victoria's face hardened. She turned her horse and rode away without another word. The Reverend lingered. He looked at the crowd, at Jacob and Clara, at the families who had stood together against power and won. His voice faltered. I may have been hasty in my judgments. You were a coward, Martha said bluntly. But cowards can change. Question is, will you? The Reverend swallowed. He looked at Clara. Mrs. Thornton, I owe you an apology. I spoke against you without knowing you. I let fear guide me instead of faith. He took a shaky breath. If you'll allow it, I'd like to start over. Clara studied him for a long moment. She saw the shame in his eyes, the genuine remorse. She thought about holding grudges, about the weight of unforgiveness. Christmas is a time for new beginnings, she said finally. I'd say that applies to everyone. Something loosened in the Reverend's face. He nodded once, then walked toward the barn, where the families were already returning to their celebration. Clara and Jacob stood alone in the yard. You did it, Jacob said softly. You turned the whole territory against him with one speech. We did it. All of us. Clara leaned into his side. I just reminded them who they were. You reminded me too. He pressed a kiss to her hair. I spent 5 years hiding from the world. You made me want to rejoin it. Clara looked up at him. Jacob, earlier what you said about falling in love with me. I meant every word. I know. She took a breath. I need you to know something. I'm not ready to replace William. I don't think I ever will be. He'll always be part of me, part of my children, part of who I am. I'm not asking you to replace him. I know that too. Clara's voice softened. What I'm trying to say is I have room, in my heart, for both of you. William will always be my first love. But you... She touched his face. You could be my last. Jacob's breath caught. Clara Thornton. His voice was rough with emotion. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that if you asked me to marry you, I wouldn't say no. Even with all this chaos, Whitmore's threats, the whole territory watching. Especially with all that. Clara smiled. I've walked through blizzards with 9 children. I've faced down angry mobs. I've survived everything life threw at me. I think I can handle being your wife. Jacob laughed a real laugh, full and warm and alive. Then I'm asking. He took her hands in his. Clara Elizabeth Thornton, will you marry me? Will you let me be a father to your children? Will you build a life with me here on this land for as long as we both live? Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Happy tears. The kind she'd forgotten existed. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Jacob McAllister. I will. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her. Behind them, someone started to cheer. Clara broke the kiss and turned. Her children were on the porch. Samuel was grinning. Abigail was crying. The little ones were jumping up and down, not entirely sure what was happening, but excited anyway. And in the barn, the gathered families were applauding. I think they approve, Jacob murmured. I think they do. She took his hand and together they walked toward their children, toward their community, toward the future they would build together. The wedding was held on New Year's Day. It wasn't fancy. Clara wore a dress she'd mended herself, made beautiful by Hannah's careful stitching, and Rebecca's ribbon trim. Jacob wore his best suit, the one Elizabeth had bought him years ago, now fitting him like a second skin. The Reverend performed the ceremony in the barn that still smelled of Christmas pine. Every family from the Christmas gathering attended. Martha Sullivan cried openly. Ezra stood beside Jacob, steady and proud. Samuel walked his mother down the aisle. Daddy would be happy, he whispered as they approached the altar. He'd want you to be happy. I know. Clara squeezed his hand. Thank you for being brave enough to tell me. Jacob took her hand as Samuel stepped back. Ready? Jacob asked. I've been ready since the crossroads. The Reverend spoke the words. They repeated their vows. When Jacob slid Elizabeth's ring onto Clara's finger, resized by the town jeweler given freely, and without hesitation, she felt the weight of it like a blessing rather than a burden. This ring belonged to someone who loved you very much, Clara said quietly. I'll honor her memory by wearing it. You honor her memory by living, Jacob replied. That's all she ever wanted for me. They kissed as husband and wife. 9 children rushed forward to embrace them. Elijah got there first, wrapping himself around both their legs. Grace and Sarah piled on. Hannah and Rebecca joined from the sides. Thomas tried to be dignified and failed. Abigail held Lily up so the baby could pat Jacob's face with tiny hands. Samuel stood apart for a moment watching. Then Jacob reached out and pulled him into the embrace. You're my son now, Jacob said. All of you are my children. Nothing will ever change that. Samuel's composure cracked. He buried his face in Jacob's shoulder and wept. Clara held them all, her old family, and her new one merged together holding tight. This was what survival looked like. Not just enduring, not just making it through, but finding joy on the other side, building something beautiful from broken pieces. This was home. Spring came slowly that year. Clara learned the rhythms of the ranch, the way the land woke from winter sleep, the patterns of planting and growth that would sustain them through the year. Jacob taught Samuel to manage cattle. Ezra taught Thomas to keep accounts. The girls learned everything from riding to gardening to the 1,000 small skills that turned a house into a home. Whitmore left the territory in March. His schemes had collapsed after the Christmas confrontation. Too many families had united against him. Too many debts had been forgiven. The bank changed hands, and the new owner, a fair man from the East, had no interest in crushing small ranchers for profit. Victoria Ashworth married a wealthy widower from San Francisco and was never seen in Montana again. The Reverend became a genuine ally. He started a charity fund for struggling families inspired by Jacob and Clara's example. His sermons changed tone, focusing on grace and community rather than judgment and fear. Martha Sullivan appointed herself grandmother to all 9 children. She visited every week, bringing sweets and stories and the kind of fierce love that made Clara's heart overflow. And the children thrived. Samuel grew into the man his father would have been proud of, steady, hard-working kind. At 18, he started courting Martha's granddaughter, and Clara pretended not to notice the way they looked at each other. Abigail developed a talent for healing. Dr. Hayes took her under his wing, teaching her medicine, preparing her for a future she'd never dared imagine. Thomas went east to school, the first in their family to pursue higher education. He wrote letters home every week, filled with questions and discoveries and dreams. Hannah and Rebecca became inseparable from the Watson girls. Their laughter filled the ranch on weekends, a sound Clara never tired of hearing. Grace and Sarah grew like wildflowers, curious and bold, afraid of nothing. They climbed trees. They rode horses. They asked questions that made adults think. Elijah never stopped being Elijah. At 8, he appointed himself ranch manager, giving orders to chickens and advice to cattle. Jacob said he'd never met a boy with more opinions about everything. And Lily, the baby, who had almost died in a blizzard, took her first steps on Clara's birthday. She walked from Jacob's arms to Clara's, laughing the whole way. "She's fearless," Jacob said, watching their youngest stumble and rise and try again. "She learned from her mother," Clara replied. Jacob pulled her close. "No, she learned from both her mothers. Elizabeth would have loved her." Clara leaned into his embrace. After 6 months of marriage, she'd stopped feeling like an intruder in Elizabeth's home. The grief was still there for both of them, but it had softened into something manageable, something that coexisted with joy rather than consuming it. "I'm pregnant," she said. Jacob went still. "What? I'm pregnant." Clara turned in his arms, looking up at his face. "Ezra suspected weeks ago. I confirmed it with Dr. Hayes yesterday." Jacob's voice broke. "We're having a baby." Number 10. Clara laughed at his expression. "I know it's a lot. I know we already have 9, but—" Jacob kissed her before she could finish. "It's perfect," he said against her lips. "You're perfect. This is everything I never dared to hope for. You're not scared?" "Terrified." He laughed, tears in his eyes. "But the good kind of terrified. The kind that means something wonderful is coming." Clara pressed her forehead against his chest. "William would say we're crazy. William would say we're blessed." Jacob's voice was gentle. "And Elizabeth would agree." Clara thought about that, about the 2 people who had loved them first, who had given them the capacity to love again. She liked to think they were watching somewhere, pleased that their losses had led to something beautiful. "We should tell the children," she said. "Tonight, after supper." Jacob grinned. "Let's make them guess. They'll figure it out in 2 minutes. Then we'll have 2 minutes of fun." Clara laughed. She took his hand and they walked toward the house together. The baby came in autumn, a boy with Clara's eyes and Jacob's jaw. They named him William Jacob, after the 2 fathers who had made this family possible. Elijah was disappointed. He'd wanted another brother to boss around. But when he held the baby for the first time, something softened in his face. "He's pretty small," Elijah said. "You were that small once," Clara told him. "I don't believe it." "Ask Abigail. She remembers." Elijah looked at his baby brother with new respect. "I guess I'll teach him stuff, when he's bigger. I'm sure he'll appreciate that." That night, Clara stood on the porch with William Jacob in her arms. The older children had gone to bed. Jacob was finishing work in the barn. The stars were bright overhead, scattered across the sky like promises. She thought about the crossroads, the snow. The moment when she'd believed everything was lost. If someone had told her then what was coming, a husband who loved her, a home that was truly hers, a community that had become family, she wouldn't have believed it. She'd been too broken for hope, too exhausted for dreams. But Jacob had seen something in her that she couldn't see in herself. He'd extended his hand and said the words that changed everything. "Then follow me home." Clara looked down at her son, her 10th child, her proof that life kept offering second chances to those brave enough to take them. "You're going to have a good life," she whispered. "You're going to know what it means to be loved. All of you are." Jacob's footsteps approached. He joined her on the porch, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "Ezra's convinced this one's going to be trouble," he said, looking at the baby. "Says he can see it in the eyes." "Ezra says that about all of them." "Ezra's usually right." Clara laughed. She leaned into Jacob's warmth, feeling the solid reality of him, this man who had become her partner, her protector, her home. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking us in, all the chaos we brought into your life?" "Not for 1 second." Jacob's voice was certain. "You brought noise into a house that was too quiet. You brought life into rooms that were dying. You brought me back from wherever I'd gone after Elizabeth." He kissed her forehead. "You saved me, Clara, just as much as I saved you. We saved each other. That's what families do." Clara closed her eyes. She thought about William Thornton, who had loved her first and best, who had given her 9 beautiful children before leaving too soon. She thought about Elizabeth McAllister, who had loved Jacob enough to want him happy even after she was gone. She thought about all the people who had helped them reach this moment. Martha, Ezra, Dr. Hayes, the families who had stood together against fear. She thought about her children sleeping inside, dreaming dreams that would carry them into futures she couldn't imagine. And she thought about herself, the widow at the crossroads who had believed she had nothing left to give. She had been wrong. "I love you," she said to Jacob. "I love you too." He held her closer. Today, tomorrow, every day after. The stars wheeled overhead. The wind whispered through the pines. Somewhere in the house, Lily cried out in her sleep, and Grace's voice murmured comfort. Clara smiled. She had walked through blizzards and stood against enemies and built a life from nothing but love and stubborn hope. And now, finally, after all the road she'd traveled, all the doors that had closed in her face, all the nights she'd wondered if morning would come, she was home. Not because of the land or the house or the money. Because of the family surrounding her. The children who called her mama. The man who called her wife. The community that called her neighbor. Because home was never a place. It was people. It was choosing to love someone even when love was terrifying. It was building something beautiful from broken pieces. It was standing at a crossroads, taking a stranger's hand, and having the courage to follow him home. Clara Elizabeth McAllister held her son, leaned into her husband's embrace, and let the peace of belonging wash over her like grace. The widow who had whispered she was lost had finally found where she belonged, and she would never be lost again.